Somewhere in the volcanic highlands of Iceland, where the wind cuts across bare lava fields and nothing should be able to survive, a living organism clings to the rock and grows. It has no roots, it has no seeds. It does not flower, it barely looks alive. And yet, for over 400 years, it has appeared in the official pharmacopoeias of Europe, the same reference books that track humanity's most trusted medicines. Most people walk right past it and never know what they're looking at. This is Cetraria islandica, known commonly as Iceland moss, though it is not moss at all. It is a lichen, a composite organism built from the permanent alliance of a fungus and photosynthetic algae fused into one body that neither could form alone. It grows loosely on open soil in cold, subalpine environments, reaching only 3 to 4 inches in height, with a tough, springy structure that ranges from pale chestnut to grayish-white, its upper surface darker, its underside lighter. It looks like something discarded by the landscape. It is, in fact, one of the most chemically complex medicinal organisms ever documented. Scientists have identified over 800 unique chemical substances produced by lichens as a group, a number that rivals the output of entire tropical rainforests of flowering plants. Iceland moss is at the forefront of that investigation. And within the last decade, the nature of its immune-modulating chemistry has begun to reveal something that even experienced researchers did not expect. What makes this organism genuinely extraordinary is its architecture. Iceland moss is a composite organism made from a blend of fungi and algae, and this partnership produces a set of biochemical compounds that neither partner could manufacture independently. Documented compounds within Iceland moss include lykesterinic acid, proto-lykesterinic acid, fumaprotocetraric acid, lichenin, isolichenin, ascorbic acid, vitamins B1, B12, and ergosterol. A chemical portfolio assembled not by evolution pressuring a single organism, but by a two-species alliance refined over millions of years. This is not a plant that heals by accident. Its chemistry is precise, layered, and now being studied with the kind of scientific attention that is usually reserved for pharmaceutical leads. And the immune system is where the most surprising findings are emerging. What the research is actually showing about how Iceland moss interacts with the human body's immune cells, that is something most people are never going to hear about in a pharmacy or a doctor's office. To understand why Iceland moss matters for immunity, you first need to understand what lichenin actually does once it enters your body. Lichenin is a beta-glucan polysaccharide mucilaginous in character that soothes mucosal tissues in the throat and gut. Most people, when they hear mucilage, think of throat lozenges and cough syrups. That is accurate as far as it goes, but it dramatically understates what this molecule is doing. Research has demonstrated that the polysaccharide lichenin, found in aqueous extracts, enhances the maturation of dendritic cells, leading to increased secretion of interleukin-10, an anti-inflammatory cytokine. Dendritic cells are not peripheral actors in the immune system. They are the sentinels, the cells responsible for detecting threats, processing them, and instructing the rest of the immune response on how to react. When Iceland moss extract pushes these cells toward greater IL-10 secretion, it is effectively shifting the immune system's posture from inflammatory toward regulatory. In plain language, it is not just fighting inflammation, it is teaching the immune system to manage itself more intelligently. The research team that documented this was not operating at the fringes of science. Freysdottir and colleagues at the University of Iceland found that the aqueous extract of Cetraria islandica has an anti-inflammatory effect, possibly by shifting cytokine secretion from IL-12P40 toward IL-10, and that significantly less arthritis was observed in rats treated with the extract, compared with those treated with saline alone. A lichen, growing on volcanic rock in the North Atlantic, producing molecules that measurably reduce arthritic inflammation in controlled animal trials. That result was published in International Immunopharmacology in 2008, and it holds up. A polysaccharide isolated from an alkali extract of Iceland moss, a galactomannan with a mean molecular weight of 18 kilodaltons, exhibited pronounced enhancement of phagocytosis in both in vitro and in vivo assays, as well as significant anti-complementary activity and a measurable increase in the rate of colloidal carbon elimination in the carbon clearance test. Phagocytosis is the process by which immune cells engulf and destroy pathogens. Iceland moss appears to accelerate it. The immune system, with Iceland moss in the picture, is not simply calmer, it is also faster. Beyond immunity, the antimicrobial spectrum of this lichen is remarkable. Protolycosterinic acid, an aliphatic compound identified as a key bioactive, was shown to inhibit Helicobacter pylori at MIC values of 16 to 64 micrograms per milliliter, connecting its centuries-old traditional use for gastric ulcers directly to a mechanism that modern medicine now recognizes as central to stomach disease. In vitro studies have also shown that Iceland moss has significant antioxidant activity, surpassing vitamin E alpha tocopherol in inhibiting lipid peroxidation, with activity that is strongly concentration-dependent, a lichen outperforming one of the most celebrated antioxidants in biochemistry. That is not a minor finding. And there is one more dimension to this story, something clinical, not just laboratory-based, that changes the picture entirely. A large-scale study tested Iceland moss extracts on thousands of children with respiratory conditions. The results were striking, and the full scope of what they found connects directly to something that most families navigate every single winter. Iceland moss does not grow easily. That is part of what makes it extraordinary, and part of what makes its existence as a medicinal resource so significant. Cetraria species have a cosmopolitan distribution primarily in the Northern Hemisphere across North America, Scandinavia, Iceland, and the broader Eurasian landmass, with the densest populations in subarctic and alpine ecosystems where most plant life cannot establish itself. It favors open, rocky terrain, peat bogs, and the kind of exposed ground that remains cold and moist through most of the year. Because it is a lichen rather than a plant, Iceland moss does not reproduce by seed or propagate by root. Its growth is mediated entirely by the stability of its fungal-algal partnership, and it is extraordinarily slow. Lichens as a group grow at rates measured in millimeters per year, not centimeters. A dense mat of Iceland moss covering a square meter of tundra may represent decades of undisturbed growth. This growth rate matters for sustainability. Commercial collection must be managed carefully, and this is now an active concern among European regulatory bodies. Iceland moss has been included in European pharmacopoeias since the 1600s and has been traditionally used to treat lung diseases and inflammation of oral and pharyngeal mucosa. In Iceland itself, the cultural use ran deeper than medicine. In Iceland, it featured in traditional dishes, including soups, porridges, and sausages, and was even added to skyr, a type of curd. During the beet sugar scarcity in Russia in 1942, Iceland moss was industrially used to extract glucose. This was not a marginal folk practice, it was caloric infrastructure. During famines and wartime scarcity across northern Europe, this lichen was a survival food. In the 12th century, Hildegard of Bingen wrote about the lichen, recommending it for lung congestion. By the 16th century, German physicians included it in lungwort preparations. What is extraordinary about this historical record is that it runs in a continuous, documented line from the medieval period straight into peer-reviewed journals published within the last 5 years. The therapeutic intuition of those early European physicians has been progressively validated, not overturned. Today, Iceland moss is commercially harvested primarily in Scandinavia, Iceland, and parts of Eastern Europe, and processed into extracts for pharmaceutical-grade cough syrups, lozenges, and dietary supplements. Commercial drug products containing Cetraria Islandica have been developed and marketed for relieving dry and irritating coughs and hoarseness, and combined formulations pair it with medicinal plants, including Thymus vulgaris and Hyssopus officinalis. The European Medicines Agency has stated there is sufficient evidence to support the use of Iceland moss as an agent for treating mouth and throat irritation and associated dry cough, and for temporary loss of appetite in adults, adolescents, and children over 6 years of age. That is a formal regulatory endorsement from one of the most demanding medicines bodies in the world. Not a traditional remedy waiting for validation, a validated remedy now operating within formal European medical guidance. There is one practical dimension to this lichen, though, that almost nobody talks about. Something you can do at home, something documented. Something that takes less than 20 minutes and costs almost nothing. And when you hear what the clinical data says about how effectively this actually works, it is going to change how you think about your medicine cabinet. In your kitchen, using nothing more than dried lichen and water. Soak Iceland moss in cold water for 10 to 15 minutes to remove bitterness. Drain, then add it to a saucepan with fresh water and bring it to a boil, reducing to a simmer for 15 to 20 minutes. Strain and drink warm. The result is a mucilaginous tea that is soothing for sore throats, coughs, and digestive irritation, with a mild, earthy flavor and a slightly bitter finish if pre-soaking is skipped. You can add honey, you can combine it with thyme. The preparation is simple, and the clinical evidence behind it is not small. A German post-marketing surveillance study assessed an Iceland moss-based pediatric cough syrup in 75 children and adolescents with mucosal irritation and dry cough. Doctors and parents reported a 60% reduction in cough intensity, with 67% rating efficacy as very good and 75% as good. Tolerance was excellent, with over 90% satisfaction and no serious adverse effects observed. That study did not use a frontier experimental compound. It used commercially available Iceland moss extract administered to real children with real respiratory symptoms. 60% reduction in cough intensity. Those numbers do not come from folklore. A large multi-center study then evaluated 2 lozenge formulations, 80 milligrams and 100 milligrams aqueous extract in 3,143 children suffering from upper respiratory conditions. 3,143 children. That is not a small-scale trial. That is population-level data. And the findings confirmed what the pharmacopoeias of Europe had been recording for 4 centuries. This lichen works. Now consider the economic dimension. Dried Iceland moss is available through herbal suppliers across Europe, the United Kingdom, and increasingly through online platforms serving South Asian and Middle Eastern markets where awareness of northern botanical traditions is growing. Wholesale prices for pharmaceutical-grade dried Cetraria Islandica range from approximately $15 to $35 per kilogram, depending on origin and processing, making it one of the most cost-effective immune support. Botanicals per therapeutic dose, available anywhere. A single kilogram of dried lichen can yield dozens of therapeutic preparations. The barrier to access is awareness, not cost. This matters because what we are witnessing right now, in real time, is the convergence of 2 separate knowledge systems. 1,000 years of empirical observation by the healers of Iceland, Scandinavia, Germany, Turkey, and Russia, and the molecular biology of dendritic cells, beta-glucan polysaccharides, and cytokine regulation arriving at the same conclusion from completely different directions. A lichen that outperforms vitamin E as an antioxidant. A lichen that trains dendritic cells to shift the immune system toward anti-inflammatory regulation. A lichen that has been formally recognized by the European Medicines Agency. A lichen that grows where almost nothing else can, producing chemistry that no laboratory has yet been able to fully replicate. The future of immune science is not going to be found only in pharmaceutical laboratories synthesizing novel molecules. It is going to be found partly in ecosystems that humanity has barely learned to look at properly. Iceland moss is not a relic of pre-modern medicine. It is one of the most biologically sophisticated organisms currently under active scientific investigation, and the research is still accelerating.